Hello, everyone. This is the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is about inspiring you to get outdoors, showing you how to lighten your pack and build your confidence so you can start living your life full of adventure. This week, I have the pleasure of being able to interview Christine Reed. Christine, aka Lady Unicorn, is a backpacker, runner, and author whose book Alone in Wonderland chronicles her solo through hike of the Wonderland Trail, which is a 93-mile trail that circles Mount Rainier, and the events from her real life that shaped her into the person she is today. I read it last Friday. I honestly believe it is a well-crafted, insightful, and often very painful memoir that had me asking myself, who has lived semi-nomadically over the last couple of years, what is it that I am trying to find? Christine, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm awesome and love that review. I'm sorry to have caused you so much pain.
Oh, no. I was just like, okay, we were sent this book. I'll read it. So I read it, pretty quickly in like one sitting.
Yeah.
And I was not ready for it to go where it went about I think like chapter 3 or 4 in the book. And I was like, oh, this is a very different book from what I had assumed just from like picking up the book. Yeah. And I was roped in. I was like, oh no, this isn't just like a travelogue kind of memoir thing. I thought it went places that I think are important places to go. I would warn the people who are going to go check out this book that it gets heavy. And so be ready for that. And that's honestly part of the strength of the book. I think it's not just like a regular old travelogue kind of thing, which is kind of what I was expecting. Just gotcha. being sent a backpacking book at the office.
Yeah, I like to say it's a human story with the backpacking scenery.
Yeah, you use the trip as a framing device for a memoir, and I really liked it. So I'm glad to have you here today. So a lot of this is covered in the book, so we can kind of brush over this a little bit, but where did you grow up and what got you into the outdoors?
Yeah, so I was a military brat. I grew up between Florida, California, and then my family moved to Arkansas. So I was in college by the time we were living in Arkansas, and I kind of, I guess I sort of call that home at this point. But I had never really done any outdoorsy things. I had been on, 6th grade camp and a few excursions with other people's parents because that wasn't something that my family did. And so when I got to college, and there's this little hill in Little Rock, Arkansas called Pinnacle Mountain that everybody hikes if you live there. And I got invited to go pretty soon after I moved to Arkansas. And I thought, this is horrible. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal. We got out there and I was like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's like, 800 feet of gain over a little less than a mile. So it's pretty tough hiking. And that was sort of my intro to hiking as an adult. So I pretty quickly wrote that off as something I wasn't interested in. I went to college, I got my degree, and then I was working a desk job, and I sort of stumbled across a blog about the Appalachian Trail while I was at work one day, just not working. And and I thought, this sounds really interesting, even though hiking has not been a positive experience for me in the past. I was at a place in my life where I was sort of looking for direction, and it seemed like people who had hiked the AT really got something out of the experience, and that it had changed their life and made them realize what was important, and all these really kind of elusive ideas that sounded fantastical and like something I wanted in my life. So I thought, I'm just going to go out there and suffer and see how that goes.
So you did hundreds of miles of the AT, and I guess what do you think you got out of that initially?
I think the biggest thing that I got I hiked 650 miles of the AT was just the knowledge as a person that I could do something hard. As a kid, I excelled at school, and that was really what my parents were focused on. And so to me, everything that was important was always easy. And when I decided I wanted to hike, I realized this is not going to be easy. And at 24 years old, it's going to be kind of the hardest thing I've ever decided I'm going to suffer through. Like I'm going to go do something really hard just to see if I can do it.
Wow. So you have a skill that is brought up in the book. You make friends on trail pretty easy. Was that a Appalachian Trail trial by fire kind of thing, or what?
I would say I did not make very many friends on the AT at all. But I did do a much better job on the Wonderland Trail. And as I have found myself feeling a little bit more at home in the hiking world, I do find it a lot easier to make friends. But on the AT, I had just recently lost my mom. I was kind of dealing with some personal stuff, and I was pretty antisocial, to be honest. I do have a couple of good friends I met on the AT who I'm still in contact with, but for the most part, I kept to myself. But I think that either direction you want to go is totally your choice. If you want to make friends, they're there, they're ready for you. Like, it's not hard to do. But you can close yourself off from it too.
Yeah, the only time I've ever like met someone on a hike was like when there were no camp spots left, and someone was like, "Can I come over here?" And then you talk with them throughout the night for a little bit, and that's about it. That's the most socializing I have ever done on the mountain without the people, besides the people that come with me, you know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, what got you into writing?
Like I said, I was always pretty good at school. And so I did write in school and in college and stuff, but I kind of had this idea, maybe someday it would be fun to write a book, but it definitely wasn't something I was like dreaming of. I really decided to write this book specifically because I felt like there was something I wanted to say. And it was something that I wished that someone else had said first. And I had not found that book. I've always been a voracious reader. So I've read many, many thousands of books in my life. And I finished the trail thinking, this is a story I have not read that I wish someone would write so that I could read it. And since I haven't been able to find that, I guess I will write it so someone else can read it.
Without, I guess, going into the book in too much detail, what do you think it was that what were you setting out when you initially started this? What did you set out to write?
I really wanted to write a bit of an exploration of the difference and the dichotomy of independence and loneliness. And especially as a young woman, I feel like I was raised with this idea that I should be strong and independent and take care of myself and never rely on a man for anything and all of these things. And I realized, through my 20s that I had sort of taken that idea of what it meant to be independent like a little too far. And I had found myself in a really lonely place. And it wasn't until I put words to that idea and I started talking to other people who were living in vans and hiking long trails and being in the outdoors world that I realized I was not the only person who was experiencing that. And that realization made me realize, or it made me hopeful. And it made me feel less alone because I was like, well, at least all these other people are lonely too, in kind of the same self-inflicted way that I felt like I was. And realizing that I wasn't alone in my aloneness really gave me a lot of hope. And that made me want to tell that story because I thought if I go ahead and just speak to the world, I am super lonely out here doing this thing, then all of those people who I haven't had a chance to talk to directly will also know that they're not alone.
It is interesting when you are deciding to go out like that. I lived in my car for a few months, and then I've gotten I got a job in Colorado where I was like just by myself in the middle of winter, in the middle of the night for like 6 months. And I think initially it's really exciting, and then it just kind of does like, oh, wow, I wish there were like a few more people around me. This would be nice. So
totally.
it's interesting that you like set out to be like you're like seeking that alone time, but there is a point where it becomes a lot.
Yeah. And I have nothing but good things to say about like spending some time alone and like getting some solitude and being alone with your own thoughts. And like there's so much to be gained from venturing out solo. And also like there's a limit to the amount of that in which we need or can benefit from.
Do you write on the trail?
I did not write on the Wonderland Trail. I didn't realize I was going to write this book until the very last day. And so then I quickly like scribbled down a few notes on a map that I was carrying about who I had met on what day and like what I wanted to remember. More recently, I hiked the Colorado Trail, and I thought that I would write a book about that. And so I was sort of taking a little bit more dense notes along the way. And then while I was stopped in Breckenridge staying with a friend, I lost the notebook that I was taking notes in. And I like tore her house apart trying to find it. I was like, I know it's here. I was freaking out. And then a few days later, I found it had like slid into the water bladder pocket in my backpack. And so I like had it the whole time. But that experience made me realize like I was like stressing a lot about making sure to take good notes and like remember everything. And I don't know, honestly, now that I've sat down and like tried to write those 40 days of hiking, whether that was worth the energy I was putting into it on trail. So I don't think in the future that I will take notes or try to write on trail.
So I write things for work and for pleasure. And I've gone out with the notebook and it just can never write a single thing down while I'm out there. I'm like tired, or there's something I want to look at, or I'm just willing to like lay down and be in my own thoughts for a little bit, but I don't want to write whatever. I've never been able to. I've never done anything as long as the AT, but I've also never been able to read while out there either. I've brought the book along, and I'm like, there's no way. And the sun's going down, and I'm just not going to waste my light on this.
I think I read 8 books on the Colorado Trail in 40 days.
How long is the Colorado Trail?
It's 486 miles.
Okay.
So I read a ton. I love to read. Like that's my like I also don't like to be outside my tent after dark because I get like spooked out. So I like get in the tent at like 6 p.m. like read for an hour and then go to bed. But yeah, I think trying to chronicle an experience as it is happening, it changes the experience. And that's kind of what I got from the Colorado Trail is like, I wish that I had thought less about what am I going to write about this later and more just like experiencing what was happening around me.
I can imagine living in your head thinking about like what should I write about, like you were just saying, and then also like then when you go back to the notebook, like how much detail should I put in this? That's what I imagine.
Yes. And honestly, like I wrote all of Alone in Wonderland afterwards, and all of the details that are in the story are the details that I remembered months later. And those are the ones that are really powerful anyway. So it's like the little details that you notice when it's happening, but forget later are often like not really the important ones anyway.
So what was the process of writing this book once you decided to?
I wrote all the chapters about the Wonderland Trail first because it had just happened and I wanted to like get sort of the chronology. And I had the time while I was working on that to kind of think about what else I wanted to include. And so I would say that the Wonderland chapters, which is 11 chapters, it's 1 chapter per day that I was on the trail, probably took me 8 months to write, 6 to 8 months. And then it was another probably 6 months of writing the in-between chapters of other things. So it's about a year for the first draft. And then, I did publish the book myself. So I hired professional editors, I hired a professional graphic designer, and then somebody to like lay out the pages and like do all of those things. So the whole process took a little over 2 years. And maybe a year and a half of that was like writing and then editing and rewriting. But I did a lot of talking about it with other people, because I think when you're trying to tell a story and when you create a memoir, like a memoir is not an autobiography, right? It's not like I was born and then this happened, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. It's really a collection of stories on a theme. And like I've talked about the theme of loneliness and independence. And so as you're writing stories, you kind of have to think like, okay, what stories from my life are going to help illustrate this point and illustrate my growth through this journey. And there, of course, are always going to be things that you like want to include because it's like, oh, this is really funny, or like, oh, people will really like this story. But if it doesn't add something to the journey, then it has to get cut out. So it was a lot of like that kind of decision making also.
Well, like how many pages a day did you write? What was that?
I'm definitely like, I guess the hair in this story, like I would write a bunch in a couple of days and then I would not touch it for 3 weeks afterwards. So like on a good day, I could write maybe 2,000 to 3,000 words, which would be like a whole chapter, maybe 2 chapters. And then, yeah, there would be weeks in between of just like ruminating and feeling guilty about not working on it.
I apologize to the audience at home that are here for backpacking stuff. I have to ask about the writing process. No, and you do get a lot of insight about the backpacking world and the Appalachian Trail and Mount Rainier, obviously. What's one of the things that you do delve into in the book is ultralighters versus I guess regular backpackers. Now we are an ultralight brand, the people who sponsor this podcast, Outdoor Vitals. Great stuff. You should check it out. You say in the book that you are not an ultralight backpacker, and I would like to ask, what is it that, as a person, I guess, who sees ultralight backpackers, probably deals with ultralight backpackers, what is it that has made you decide to like steer clear of that stuff, just in general?
I mean, a big factor for a lot of people, I think, is cost. And as backpacking becomes more popular, the cost is going down. And there's things that I've seen that I'm like, oh, maybe I could afford to get that now. But specifically when I was on the Wonderland Trail, I was still using all of my gear from the AT in 2015. I hadn't upgraded anything. And since then I have upgraded to like an ultralight down quilt and a super light, Nemo tent. And I love those things. But I think there is a line, right? There's a line between the Nemo tent, which is 1 pound, 11 ounces. It's still fully sealed. It still has a rain fly and a floor. And then there's like real ultralight where like I ran into a guy on the Wonderland Trail who was sleeping under a staked out poncho. And like mad respect for that, but I don't want to sleep with bugs. So like there's a line, right? There's a line between the comfort of what you're willing to carry versus the comfort of what you're willing to go without. And I think there's a lot of people who maybe would claim to be ultralight who aren't in that extreme of a camp. But yeah, I have some like bare minimums, which is that my tent will be zipped closed. I will be fully enclosed. And that guy, I guess the joke I was making when I was telling that story was the guy said, oh, I really like to wear tall socks because then if I get something dirty or wet, I can use the top of my socks as a towel. And coming from a guy who was not carrying long pants at all, like he was wearing shorts, a button down, socks, like that was his whole outfit.
The guys, the way that we usually set up our stuff here is like with food and everything. Our packs are usually around like 20 pounds, depending on how like luxurious you want your trip to be. My boss will like cut the toothbrush in half.
Yeah.
And he has all of his medications in a baggie. Like it's got like ibuprofen and whatever else he's taking.
You just have to know what they are.
And he has a sticky note that is a guide that says what each
ibuprofen
is.
Brown.
Yeah, exactly.
Benadryl, pink.
Exactly. So there's a bit of that here, but no, I think the stuff that we make here is pretty high quality stuff. The idea is that you have one good piece that you can use over and over again, and it's
totally
like damaged over time, basically. But that was kind of fun to read.
Not a criticism of ultralight at all. Just
no.
It's just people say, and the same guy was like, I love eating cold oatmeal. And I was like, you are a liar.
See, they'll take the Toaks titanium like pot things. They're really lightweight. I've been the guy at the office who just takes, because if we do like a single night overnighter.
Yeah.
All the time. And I've been doing low carb for like 5 years, something like that.
You just eat beef jerky the whole time.
I legitimately have just brought a summer sausage up for like one night. It was just like, that was going to be my dinner, was just a piece of summer sausage. I've been made fun of constantly for that
I feel like you can go without a lot of
months.
things on a one night. Like on a one night, you're like, I'll just eat a bunch before I go.
Yeah.
Take a snack.
You don't need to bring a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But it'd be like, just one thing. Like, oh, you need all this electrolytes, you need all this stuff. So they still want some comforts. They're not willing to deal with the singular piece of food. But yeah, everything here is very ultralight. And I mean, I was not an ultralight hiker when I got this job. I was just like a regular guy. And then I started like using their stuff, like, oh, this is great.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends who I hiked the Colorado Trail with was saying like, man, I wish I just knew somebody who had a full ultralight kit that I could borrow for like a 2-day and see like how different that experience. She's a notorious overpacker. Her pack is always like bulging and things are like sticking out the top. So she was like, if I could just borrow somebody's and then I would know, like, could I hack it as an ultralighter? You know,
what do I actually need?
Right.
And you don't know that if you're packing your fears, I guess.
Totally. Yeah.
All the time.
And the more I've backpacked, the more trails I've done, like the smaller my pack gets, even without upgrading.
Yeah. So tell me about the Colorado Trail experience. I didn't know about this before we started the phone call.
Yeah. So I hiked the Colorado Trail from Durango to Denver in August. We started August 10th and I finished September 19th last year. And I have to say, I thought I was going to write a book about the Colorado Trail. And then I went out there and it was awesome. And I had the best time ever. And the weather was perfect and nothing bad ever happened.
There's no conflict.
And I was like, nobody's going to read a book about this. So now I'm having to kind of rework my book concept for the next thing I'm writing. But my biggest takeaway from the Colorado Trail was like, dude, go northbound. Everybody goes southbound. The book is written southbound. The rules all say you have to go southbound. Don't do it. Go north. It was so much better.
What does that change? As someone who I don't know like hardly anything about that trail, so.
Yeah, there's a few reasons that I could gather of why people go southbound. And one of them is if you're coming from out of state, you're flying into Denver and then you can just get directly on the trail and then you figure out logistics to get back to the airport from Durango. That's like a later problem. That's one of the reasons. And the other one is that the elevation, like if you start in Durango, you're at 12,000 feet pretty quickly, like within 2 days. But if you start in Denver, it's sort of like more gradually takes you don't get to 12,000 feet until like a week in maybe. And so I think a lot of people for acclimation purposes, like think starting from Denver would be better. But I still saw so many people this past year get off trail for acclimation, like for elevation reasons, even starting from Denver. So I think really you shouldn't be counting on the trail to acclimate. Like you should get to Denver a week early, hang out in Denver, then go to Durango, then start in Durango and go that way. And my friend came from Boston. And she flew out, stayed at my place for a week. And then we went and hiked and camped in Nederland, which is at 11,000 feet. So we slept at 11,000 feet, came back to Denver, then went to Durango and started. And we didn't have any problems with elevation.
Wow. I moved to Vail, and Vail is at 8,300 or something like that. It's not even like that bad as far as Colorado is concerned. I was winded for about 3 months. Like everywhere I went, if I was going upstairs, I was like, and I was in the best shape I'd ever been in my entire life, which isn't that great, but it's still the best shape I've ever been in. And then but Vail like destroyed me for like a few months. I can't even imagine coming from Boston to that.
Yeah. And well, she had come to visit me a few years ago and we just went on a hike in Waterton Canyon, which is the Denver end of the Colorado Trail. And it's flat. Like you're walking on a flat dirt road for 6 miles. And we walked maybe half a mile and she was like, I'm really nauseous. I don't feel good. Can we leave? So when we decided we were going to do the Colorado Trail, I was like, okay, we have to have like an acclimation plan for you when you get here.
Gotta prep for it. I had a guy on this podcast a few weeks ago who was getting ready for Mount Kilimanjaro.
Nice.
And he lives in, I want to say Kentucky.
Okay.
So he would actually go around. He got like the equipment for it. He got like the mask thing, like the oxygen deprivation thing, and he would walk around his town wearing this crazy mask. There's a pretty funny story about it, but I didn't even know that was possible until I talked to the guy. I was like, wow, could have been prepping for. I've had problems at high elevation outside of just Vail, and so I've always been thinking about like, okay, how can I, and I live in Utah, which like it's high, but it's not like super high. Like you're looking at like people live between like 4,400 and 6,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah, that's like Denver.
Yeah, it's okay, but there's still like once you're up there in the 8 to 12 range, it doesn't matter anymore. It hurts.
Yeah. When people, I think, don't realize how elevation will affect you, which I think is why it's such a problem on the Colorado Trail, people coming into Denver and just starting to hike immediately because, 7,000 feet will affect you if you're coming from sea level. And I see all the time in Colorado, like hiking 14ers, crazy people like out there just like, oh, we just flew in from Michigan and we're like going for this hike. And I was like, please don't die.
Are you still a slow hiker?
Yes, absolutely.
Self-described slow hiker in the book.
Yes.
Yeah. Even though I saw on your blog you'd picked up running since, right?
I have picked up running. I was running before the Wonderland Trail.
Really? Okay.
Not as much as I am now, but I kind of after the AT, I started running because I was like, I have to move my body and I don't have time to hike 10 hours a day. So I need to figure out a way to like be active. And so I started running. And I will say that running had a huge impact on my hiking. So if you're a hiker who like has a hard time breathing and like fast heart rate and stuff like that, like running really can be super helpful. But I know running's not like a fun thing for most people. It's not a fun thing for me either. Let me just like put that out there. The funny thing about the book is that actually, as I was publishing it, I got a diagnosis, which sort of explained a lot of my difficulty with hiking. I have a form of dysautonomia called POTS, which is short for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And essentially it causes your heart rate to go crazy, like when you do things like stand up and walk.
Oh, wow.
So the things I'm describing in the book are like just my heart is pounding and my lungs are struggling and I'm breathing really hard and I'm sweating and I'm gross and all of these things, which, lots and lots of people have reached out to me and been like, yes, me too, preach. So I don't want to like take away from that because I think a lot of us are just struggling and that's totally fine. Or not even that we're struggling, but we see other people who it seems so easy for and we're like, why does this feel so hard? And that internal struggle and self-doubt is like a huge part of the book and a huge part of my personal story. And something that I think a lot of people relate to. And I think one of the biggest things I've taken away from backpacking as a rule is just like, you don't have to be good at something to do it. And I think that's something people have really like appreciated from the story.
Well, and most people can walk. So hiking's just a little bit, it's a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. Hiking is it's a very accessible thing to do. But I think so we see reason. So many examples of like what a hiker should look like or what a hiker should be able to do. And that discourages a lot of people from trying.
Yeah. Does running help with that? What was it called to get POTS?
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, so I was training for a 50K when I got diagnosed. And I went to the doctor and I explained to her like what my physical body felt like when I was doing hard things. And she immediately knew what the problem was. And she said, oh, you have POTS. So my diagnosis was surprisingly easy considering this is something that's like wildly underdiagnosed. But then I was showing her my heart rate charts from my Garmin watch. And I was like, this is me running 20 miles. And the heart rate's like 180 the whole time. And she was like, people with POTS don't really run. That's not a thing. And I was like, oh, I do. Like, that's what it looks like. And she says, that's what it would look like if someone with POTS ran 20 miles. But I've just never seen somebody do that.
Wow.
So it's really just like, I learned to suffer for long periods of time with my heart rate 180. But yeah, it does. But then she's like, you should definitely keep doing that because if you've learned how to tolerate your body feeling that way, then like it's great for you to be active.
Oh wow, I did not know that was a thing. That sounds like, I don't know. Like I used to be really fat, like really big, like really big, like 300 pounds. I used to be huge. And slowly got in better and better shape over like 6 years. And my heart rate stuff, like at the beginning, like hiking was really hard, and now hiking's not very hard. There's always been kind of a gradual thing. So when you were talking about like, you did 600 plus miles of the AT, and you're still hiking, slow, and you're still having difficulty. I'm like, how? So that does line up.
Yeah, totally. Because for lots of people, like you can go out on a trail like the AT and be pretty out of shape. And by the time you've hiked several hundred miles, like your body has gotten used to it. And
I can imagine after a couple of weeks, your body will kind of get used to it.
Yeah, people get their trail legs. And one of the hardest things for me on the AT was looking around and being like, what are these trail legs everybody keeps talking about? That I was just, and over the course of many years of backpacking and running and trying to, quote, get in shape, my body didn't really get better at doing things. My mind got better at tolerating what my body felt like.
Wow. Hey, there you go. There you go, guys.
Do hard things. And just eventually accept that it's going to be hard forever.
Speaking of hard things, you ran rim to rim at the Grand Canyon. I'm about to be part of a support team of people doing rim to rim to rim, running that at the Grand Canyon. Do you have any Grand Canyon specific advice?
Ooh, read Death in the Grand Canyon before you go. I read it right before I went, and it was like, you will die of exposure. Do not separate from the person you are with. Like, here are all the things that can kill you. And honestly, like,
is that like what is that? Is that a pamphlet? Is that like a published book? What is that? Okay.
Oh gosh, I don't have it here. Most of the national parks have a Death in National Park book. Nice. Where they essentially, like, it's a chronology of everyone who's ever died in the park and how they died. And there's a little bit of like, don't do this because this is stupid. And that's how these people died. But it's really informative. And I found Death in Grand Canyon like a strange comfort before I went and ran rim to rim. The other thing I would say is just like, remember, it's supposed to be fun, especially when it really sucks. Yeah. And also don't be surprised if you get stuck behind like a mule train, or we got halted probably 5 miles from the finish because somebody had fallen off of a mule and a helicopter was coming to get them. And so they had like blocked the trail while the helicopter came in. And so we ended up standing there for sitting on the trail for like 45 minutes. And honestly, at that point, I needed a break. So it was great for me. But there were other people who were doing rim to rim to rim who were kind of like bent about having to stand there and wait. So just like be prepared mentally that could happen.
Be prepared. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, you're not writing a book on the Colorado Trail. Do you know what you're doing next?
I'm still going to probably tell some Colorado Trail stories. But I'm working on a second book that is also a memoir, a little bit more about being an outdoorsy person and doing things like hiking and running and rock climbing, and talking about identity. And when you get to call yourself a runner, and when you get to call yourself a rock climber and a backpacker, and how we relate to these ideas of who we are, and when we're, quote, allowed to claim things as our identity. Which I know is something a lot of people struggle with.
Okay. Shooting off the hip without giving away what your thesis would be, I guess. No, I am asking for that. When would you call yourself a hiker?
There's not really an objective answer to that question. I think it's like, if you do the thing, you do the thing, right? I know a lot of people have qualms about specifically the term thru hiker. You don't get to call yourself a thru hiker until you've completed a thru hike in a lot of people's minds. And then there's like the whole purity of the hike and all of these other things that people like to get irate about. But I think a lot of those things are about mindset, and it's about what you're setting out to do and how you see yourself in that world. And I hiked 650 miles of the AT, and that is not a complete through hike. But I mean, I would have called myself a through hiker. I mean, essentially, as soon as I stepped on trails, like, right, I'm here to through hike. I'm walking, I'm carrying this stuff. Like, I am literally in the act of through hiking. Like, why not call yourself a through hiker then?
Yeah, and at the very least, you could say you through hiked a section of it. Like, even though that's like a section, whatever, section hike. I don't know how many states you went through at
Yeah.
650 miles, but
Yeah, I just feel like there's a really like exclusionary idea around a lot of different sports and whether you get to call yourself a participant in this. And I just want to like
that is
fight against that a bit.
So that is an interesting thing. So part of my background, I'm a media guy. Like, I like to backpack. It's always been a part of my life. And I got this job partially because it was like, oh, he's a filmmaker and he does this. We need guys who can make commercials and make podcasts and stuff like that. So I got this job based upon a whole bunch of different things. As a filmmaker, like, you do have to start yelling at your friends who let's say graduated film school and haven't written anything. They haven't made any short films. They haven't done anything. And you go, what does a filmmaker do? And you go, they yell at them. They go, they make films. What does a writer do? They write. And if you don't write, you're not a writer. It doesn't mean you have written a book. It means that you write. It is like the act of it, like the verb to write is part of who you are if you're going to call yourself a writer. Or yeah. So I have had those types of discussions before, just not about hiking, not about the outdoors, but
yeah. Well, and I think there's too this idea of like, okay, I was a thru hiker once. I did that back then. And like, am I still a thru hiker? Do I still call myself that? How often do I have to like renew my thru hiker card to like get to keep calling myself that? And same thing goes with running, right? And I think sometimes we get really attached to these identities that we have like gone through a lot of effort to get, right? Like I went out and I did all of these things so that I could call myself a runner. And now it's like, is running even still that important to me? Am I still doing this because I still want this identity? Or like, what's the motivation behind things? And like, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of questions to be asked in that realm. And when I bring it up with other outdoorsy people, I think it's something a lot of us are maybe not consciously thinking about, but definitely experiencing.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a cool subject. That is making me think a little bit. So
don't worry, this book will hurt you also.
Okay. Where can people go and purchase Alone in Wonderland?
It is available at aloneinwonderland.com, my personal website. You can get a signed copy there with like a special edition little postcard set. If you want to just get the book from your local bookstore, you can do that. They can get it for you if they're not already carrying it. It's available all of the usual online places. And it will soon be available in ebook format, but I don't have a date for that yet.
Perfect. Thank you, Christine, for coming on to the show. I really appreciate you taking your time, and I appreciate. I thought this book was fantastic. Thank you for writing this book.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And anybody can come hang out and chat with me on Instagram at Rugged Outdoorswoman.
Awesome. Hey guys, remember to feel free to send us your comments, questions about backpacking, cool outdoor stories, or ideas for future episode topics. And if we think it'll bring value to our audience, we will read it on the show. You can send those by commenting on our Live Ultralight podcast YouTube channel. And please subscribe, by the way, to that channel. Or you can send us an email at liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com. We did have a new iTunes review from Wheelard. April 4th, they say, great, and it's 5 stars, great, entertaining, and informative podcast. Thank you, Wheelard, for your kind review. Remember, guys, if you leave a nice review for us on iTunes, we will read that out loud on the show. Please be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever. And I want to thank again Christine for coming on to the show. I do think the book is an excellent read, and I hope that you guys at home will go check it out. There will be a link in the description to her website where you can purchase the book. Have a good week, guys.